say here today. We'll get started in a few minutes. The way I usually do this is I'm in conversation with our guest, talk a little bit about his background, how he kind of got into all this, and obviously with a career as varied and as amazing as his, we can't get into too much. But I'm gonna just sort of use, I'm gonna go into some of the early stuff that kind of put him in the direction, and then we'll skirt some of the main stuff as it is, and then I'll have a pleasure to turn it over to your questions. The way I usually do this is I'll just set up a line in one of these places. I'll hold the microphone and I'll say, hey, what's your name? Go ahead and give your name. I'll say, what's your question? Go ahead and jump right into your question. If you kind of headline your question, go right on into it. You don't have to go into the whole, I remember the first time I saw an Indiana Jones, saw my dad, it was really funny. So it's like, hey, that guy, hey, that's the guy from that other show I saw. I really enjoyed his video. If you go right on into that, okay, we'll be able to get into more questions. Rule one, though, is that you get one question at a time. You are welcome to go back in the line and try for another one. Please don't try to be slick and do two questions by adding an and in the middle of it, because then I'll stop being a host and I have to become a moderator. And I much prefer being a host than a moderator. So that being said, and and please don't make any requests. It's like, oh hey, can you please say like buy axe or anything like that, or silly stuff like that, or sample my homemade hot sauce. You'd be surprised the amount of stuff that we'd ask you to do. So with that being said, let me pull out my little sheet here. So, CollectorCon 2023, are you ready? He's an award-winning actor whose incredible body of work includes the Indiana Jones film series, Star Trek Voyager, I, Claudius, Gargoyles, The Living Daylights, The Untouchables, The Shannara Chronicles, Batman Unburied, the Fantastic Four animated series as the voice of Thor, The Trial of the Incredible Hulk as the first live-action Kingpin, aka Wilson Fisk, Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy, and of course, Sliders. Please join us to discuss these roles and more. Welcome, John Rhys-Davies! He was in the back, y'all didn't notice.
On this beautiful, warm, morning. Yeah, I thought I was in Antarctica when I woke up this morning. Right, okay. Oh, how formal. Comrades, I have gathered the entire presidium here to justify my next move in the war against the capitalist Americans.
Da.
Right.
Spasiba, tоварищ.
I hate this big barrier between an audience.
Do you want to we can move this back and just sit in the chairs in front?
I'll tell you what.
Let's move this back a little bit.
Right. Okay, who's got the most stunning, difficult, embarrassing question?
Well, hold on. I get my pace setters first. That's fine. Let me do this. Let me do the warm-ups. We'll do some of the light biography stuff, and then I'll jump on in, and then we'll try to get the crazy singers. How's that for you?
You are familiar with the concept of the disruptor,
AKA the moderator. Well, first of all, thank you for joining us here today. Thank you. Y'all can hear him okay?
Yes. Can you hear me at the back? Yes. Good.
All right. Theater.
Indeed.
Well, first thing I always do whenever I have a solo guest, I always ask them what got into their art, in which case, what drew you into acting?
Well, a desire not to have to get up before 10 o'clock in the morning. That was one of my childhood dreams, little did I know. That actually, when we work in film, we always work a 5-day week, so we generally work a 6-day week. And it's a minimum of 12 hours, and when I was doing Lord of the Rings, the pickup was generally 3 o'clock in the morning, so that I might be ready to have the makeup on by 9 or 10 or 11 or something like that. What drew me into acting? Well, the very first play that I saw was Oedipus Rex, a school play at a boarding school where I was desperately unhappy, and it was the first play I ever saw. And those of you who know Socrates and know that play would understand that when you're 11 years old and you see that, you actually do know what through pity and fear, effecting its purgation of these emotions is about. In fact, I learned that's a piece of Aristotle on tragedy. I was a very unhappy little boy at school. I'd grown up in Africa. I really hadn't learned to play with other children because there weren't any other children, in the sort of proper remote place where we were. And going to an English boarding school was a real culture shock. And you can still hear me at the back, I hope. Good, good, good. When I saw this play, suddenly my life changed. I left the hall and went up to the senior library. Now I was a first former, and only fourth formers and above were allowed in the senior library. So I marched boldly in. I knew roughly what I was looking for, and I found Aristotle on tragedy. Tragedy, then, is the imitation of an action, complete and of some importance, acted, not narrated, in language enhanced by distinct and varying means, and through pity and fear, effecting its purgation of these emotions. I've never quite worked out how you can express that last sentence in any other way. And of course it is the crux of any debate about tragedy. But it surely woke me up, and I ceased dreaming about becoming an opening bat for the England cricket team or a nuclear scientist, and focused on being the greatest dramatic writer of all time. Unfortunately, I fell into acting. The writing's taken second place, but it's coming on. It's coming on. Sorry, a short answer to your very long question.
Not at all. You were doing some really solid work. You were sort of earning your bones. You were in theater and you were doing television gigs and Mama did there. I remember the very first thing I noticed you in was the seminal but kind of forgotten now miniseries Shogun.
That's right.
As Vasco.
Yes, Vasco Rodriguez.
Yes.
I don't know whether you know James Clavell's great book, Shogun. I think it's one of the finest popular novels, actually, of the mid-late period of the 20th century. It's everybody wanted to get to the Far East. Why? Because, and the history is extraordinary. Because all the European Christians were looking for spices, a sea route to the Indies, but also because Ferdinand and Isabel of Castile, who had finally driven the Moors out of Spain, believed that there was a mythical kingdom ruled by a man called Prester John, a Christian kingdom in the Far East, and if they could form an alliance with them, they could recapture the Holy City as well. I mean, the Crusades linger on for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And indeed, some would say today we are still fighting against, or people on both sides are still fighting with this strange sort of crusading vigor against each other. Anyway, when the Turks, the Ottoman Turks, captured Constantinople, the last great outpost of the Roman Empire, the Silk Route from China and India really dried up, the overland route, and so the cost of spices and silks, spices in particular, because don't forget, in Europe there was no refrigeration. In wintertime there was no grass for the cattle, so you killed your surplus cattle, salted it, and ate it over the winter months. Sometimes there are stories, many stories, where peasants would actually take their cattle into the underside of the house and feed them on anything that they could get over the winter. And the cattle were so weak in the summer that they had to be carried out and hand-fed grass. So salted beef and salted fish were a staple, and a good chef was worth a king's ransom. That's why the nobles really sort of confined their, didn't like the peasants sort of doing any hunting in their grounds, because at least they could get fresh meat in winter when they went hunting. Anyway, that was a somewhat digression, wasn't it? Anyway, the Portuguese were the first. If you look at the map of Europe, it's very interesting. The Portuguese go south around the Cape and find their way to the Far East. The Spaniards tend to go west, and they bump into the West Indies, which turned out to be some outliers for the great continent of America. The English and the French particularly go northeast, to find the legendary northwest passage. And of course that came to no good at all. So we reversed and went west and south, and the other darn which way. But the Portuguese got there, and the Portuguese Catholics, and Dominicans in particular, were hugely successful in Japan. By 1600, there were 3 million Japanese Christian converts. But that came to a halt when a man called Tokugawa became shogun. There'd been about 50 or 60-year war between the great warring warlords there, and finally Tokugawa became, not in 1600, but in 1600 an English seaman called Will Adams, with 3 Dutch ships, sailed to try and get into the business in Japan. And he was shipwrecked, and they endured pretty horrible privations, including at least one of them being boiled alive. But Will Adams was a good navigator, and basically he taught Tokugawa deep sea navigation. The Chinese had trade, the Japanese had trade, but they were coastal sailors rather than deep water sailors. The Portuguese were deep water sailors, and they actually made the trade between China and Japan, and took a very handsome profit out of it. Sent that profit back. And Adams basically becomes a gunnery expert and teaches modern gunnery to the man who becomes shogun, and was never allowed to leave Japan. He had a little wife in Devon he never got to see again, and he ended up with another Japanese wife. I think he died in 1625. His house is still there. It's known as the Anjin's house, Anjin being pirate. And it's a wonderful story about Western sensibility encountering the Eastern sensibility. You know, we all say everybody's the same, but there are sometimes profound differences. We had an illustration of that when we were shooting. We were on this boat that was tilting and making everybody seasick, except Chamberlain. And the director said, "Stop that! Shut that door!" An American carpenter jumped up and grabbed the first saw there and started sawing a 4x2 to jam it up against the door and keep it shut. And he'd done 2 or 3 strokes like that. And he let out this yelp of confusion because an American saw, Western saws, cut on the push stroke. The teeth are designed like that. A Japanese, and we know that that's the most efficient way of cutting on the push stroke. The Japanese know it's exactly the opposite. They cut on the pull stroke. And that yelp that he gave was the sound of a man finding a cultural divide and falling straight into it. It was a total surprise. He'd never realized that. And then, of course, we had to have the competition. You know, their saw against our saw, and two of their best men. And, you know, the wood fell at exactly the same sort. You know, you couldn't beat them. But it was such an interesting experience. Shogun, great show. And Richard Chamberlain, what a great leading man he was. We'd overstayed our time in Tokyo in the tanks doing the storm sequences. We were meant to be there 3 weeks, we were there 8 weeks, which meant that we were an entire month behind on the schedule. And that was very dangerous. And then we went down to, morale was pretty low by this time. And we went down and we got on these galleys that we were now shooting the daytime stuff. And nobody had built a galley in Japan for 300 years. It was top heavy. Now, picture this, the temperature is about 106. There are no waves. The sun is hitting the water and it's a solid moving glare of light. Humidity, we would change our shirts 6 times a day, and we would, by the time we walked out of the hotel, it was still pretty wet. And the boat is pitching like this. And it's the first time we're out there. And within minutes, the first person starts throwing up. The director had taken 3 Dramamine, 3 Dramamine, was directing lying on the floor. All right, you know, sort of. Okay, roll it. I cut and go again. Chewy Elizondo, our lighting camera, tough Mexican, you know, really compact, tough guy. You know, Chewy would finish the shoot and cut. And again. And people were just dropping like flies. And I'm watching Richard. You know, by the time we got to 1 o'clock, everyone was looking at Richard, just hoping he would stand up and say, "Come on, guys, this is above and beyond the call of duty. This is ridiculous." And if he had done that, I think morale was so low that the production could have collapsed. And what did Richard do? He did his shot. He sat down, he put his umbrella up, he took his fan out like that. And when somebody vomited in his eye line like that, he just changed his eye line. And it is glorious sometimes to see a real leading man. A leading man isn't just the guy who plays the big part and gets the biggest buck. A real leading man is a man who will hold the company together. And that was the finest demonstration of it that I've ever seen. And I love that man for it. He was, and he is, he's alive. A marvelous actor, a great leading man, and an inspiration to his fellow actors.
I had the pleasure of seeing him on stage a few years ago in Spamalot, of all things. And he was absolutely wonderful with it.
Of course.
Absolutely. And Shogun, of course, as I understand it, I think from our last conversation, everybody in the world watched it when it came out. It was the early days of the big mini-series, and this was the first one, so in the early 80s, this was a really big deal. It's also like more of the remnants as well. But I believe Mr. Spielberg watched it as well, and I think you caught his eye.
Well, that's true. By the way, it really was quite a shock to the American public. I think it went on Thursday nights or Wednesday nights of every week, and restaurant visitors just folded in New York and Los Angeles because everyone was watching Shogun. And apparently, it's as a result of the of that series that suddenly eating sushi and sashimi became popular. So every time you go and find there's a local sashimi or sushi place near you, that's probably a result of people watching Shogun. That's where the idea of eating raw fish, had been utterly alien to most Americans, most Europeans, really. But then, they can eat it, and actually they survive on it, and gosh, it tastes really good too.
And to all anime fans, you're welcome. No, seriously, anime was growing at the same time too, and there's a market too. But this brought basically interest in Japanese history and Japanese culture to my generation and Gen X. This really was one of the lit the fuse.
It's a great series. And what were you?
Some guy named Spielberg watched it.
Oh yeah.
That guy looks good. I think he's.
Well, after that, I had the good fortune of working with Blake Edwards on Victoria, and Blake came to me one day and he said, Steven Spielberg sent an inquiry as to what sort of person you are, and I said, he's a monster, probably kicks dogs and beats small children. but he'd like to see you about this next movie. And I got sent the script, and my agent phoned me and said, well, what do you think? And I said, look, I've never read a script like this. It's pages and pages of stage direction, what's happening. He said, well, anything else? And I said, yeah, I get the feeling that this is so out of the ballpark that it's either going to be one of the biggest hits of all time, or it's going to be a complete disaster. And Spielberg had just finished 1941, which is actually a bloody good film.
I agree.
Forgive me.
You can say that here. It's okay. It's not as bad as on the other side.
All right. And he said, well, do you want to do it? And I said, yes, of course I want to do it. I want to work with Spielberg. I think he's terrific. Somebody was waving at the back. I think they were just having a yawn. That's all right. So I went and saw Stephen, and I said, look, this part is written for a 5'2" Egyptian digger. What do you expect me to do? Have surgery or? And he said, no. I want to cross between the character you played in Shogun and Falstaff. And I said, well, I actually have played Falstaff. Yes, I can do that. And that started it off. And it was a wonderful production. It was tough. All the big shows are physically tough. I mean, I got a bug there. Oh, dear Lord. I grew up in Africa. I have cast iron belly. At least I did have until then. You understand that we had 5,000 extras and about 20 latrines. And the Arabs were, they were pretty impoverished, their diet wasn't very good, and their health wasn't very good. So after 5 or 6 weeks in the desert, you went out for a walk and sat down and put your hand in the ground, you would think, oh, dear me. It was pretty unhealthy. Added to which, September in Tunisia is the date harvest, and that's when the flies come. Imagine an area about this size, about the size of the stage, maybe double. That's where we sat to have our lunch. They would come out and spray DDT in the air all the way around, copiously, before we sat down. And once we sat down, in every cubic foot of air, there were 100 flies. Right? So you were doing this and getting the food, and as you did that, a fly would land on it and go into it. It was a nightmare. In fact, you see that in Raiders of the Lost Ark. You see that one that goes into the French archaeologist's mouth as he talks.
Martin Freeman, yeah, he's like, give mercenaries a bad name.
Yeah. It was an amazing experience, and Spielberg at the top of his game, you know, just endlessly creative, and it was fun. It was free. It was, you know, people made suggestions, and we tried things out, and we scrapped things, and when I saw the premiere and saw that big rolling ball, the opening thing, I was infinitely depressed. I thought, oh my God, this is so superb. How can the rest of the film possibly live up to it? And I sat there and watched, and it did. It was glorious. Wonderful, wonderful. Sorry about that.
No. And you got a chance to revisit the character a few years later, and this year we will see you revisit the character again, and that's probably about the most we could talk about that.
I can neither confirm nor deny. No, I guess I have to confirm that I'm in it, since they put it out on the darn thing. But apparently, I'm contractually obliged not to talk about it.
Why I bring it up, so we can talk about the other two Indiana Jones films he's been in, but Dial of Destiny, well, let's have to hold off on that.
Oh, yeah, I will say something about that. Great script. Great director. Did you see Ford versus Ferrari, anybody?
Oh, yeah.
The only film I watched last year 3 times. I think it was superb. And that was before I got offered the chance to work.
I wrote a review of it and I said, it's a manly film about manly men doing manly things to the unmanly men who try to impede them.
That's really very good. I like that, yes. Yes. I mean, it's a wonderfully insane male thing, isn't it? To try and go faster. But then that's men. We are naturally competitive, and we have to. As we grow up, we have to sort of learn that competitiveness is not necessarily. You don't always have to come first or be miserable.
Real quick, we have to do something. Let me explain this. You've spoken, you're speaking, and you continue to speak of Lord of the Rings experience and everything else. Let's just do this. From your perspective, what would you call maybe the craziest day you had on the set of Lord of the Rings? I know there were some doozies.
What day wasn't a crazy day? Oh, there are wonderful little vignettes. There I am, halfway up a mountain, watching 2 people with a hamper struggling up the hill with my arm. Then there's a woman struggling up the hill with my helmet, and another person with my boots. And I'm up there, and they put it all on. And I'm now 80 pounds heavier than I was at breakfast time. And Peter Jackson says, now, run up there. And I have to tell you, we dwarves are natural sprinters. the distance does get you a little bit. And when they asked me if I wanted to be in the Hobbit, I had two answers. And do all that again? You must be nuts. But the real answer was, look, I've been one of one. Why would I want to be one of 13? And I think it was a smart answer, really. You know, you're bound to disappoint if you read something.
I'm actually a defender of the Hobbit trilogy. I think they were fine. I think the problem was that compared to Lord of the Rings was so far into that stratosphere that, like you said, the fear at the beginning of Raiders, where it's like, how are they going to top this? And he put his heart into it. And he's such a passionate filmmaker. I love all this stuff. So, and again, and you've spoken about the makeup challenges and everything else. So
And you notice how they cheated in The Hobbit, you know. You can imagine the studio talk, can't you? Okay, right, so now who's going to play the leading woman in this? Who you know? Well, there are no women. What do you mean that there are no women? Well, it's about a hobbit and 13 dwarves. What, 13 people looking like John Rhys-Davies? How the hell are we going to pay for the makeup on that something? Come on, forget that. I want women in it. Make up something. Galadriel, I love that girl, lovely actress, wonderful. Put her in it, and a few other things, and you got the little pointy-head guy. Yeah, he's okay. And,
the girls like him.
Yeah, they do. But come on, 13? You sure it's 13 dwarves? I mean, can't we do 6? 7? 7 sounds like, I don't know, it's been done before.
Then you take Graham McTavish, who's 6'9", and make him a dwarf.
That's right. And okay, look, I'll tell you what you do. Just find 2 good-looking men, minimal dwarf makeup on them, and who cares about the rest anyway? For God's sake. That's how I suspect the casting went. I was miffed because I thought, oh, those poor buggers, they're going to be sort of locked into the little fellow just walked in the back. Do turn around. Oh yeah. I thought it would be wonderful just for them to spend 8 hours in makeup every morning. How they do that? They barely did it. I mean, just a little bit of a nose here and the hairy feet. No, they didn't have hairy feet. The other side of the hair. I mean, just
in my day, dwarves spent 8 hours in the makeup chair.
In my day, to be a dwarf took patience and time and courage. These modern young dwarves,
we'll go over and take some questions. I think I'll do this Donahue style. Just raise hands. I'll sort of swoop around, so we've got a few minutes and all that stuff too. But John, before I do that, I just want to say, pat myself, pat this audience. I just have to thank you. I mean, you've got such a wonderful body of work. I mean, we're going to do this again next week at another convention, and there's some other stuff I'll talk to you about. But you've done so many great things. So for all the entertainment, for all the enjoyment, for all the education you've given us, I thank you. I thank you for your talents. I thank you for your professionalism. I thank you for all the performances you've given us all these years.
Oh, you're very good. May I just say one thing that, actually there's 2 things I want to say. One is that my old friend Sam Neill, with whom, a wonderful actor you remember from Jurassic Park, has apparently a treatable but possibly bad form of cancer. And I only read about it in the newspaper today. And I would like all of you who love his work. I've worked with him twice. We did Riley Ace of Spies together many years ago. And we did Ivanhoe. Ivanhoe is a film that on every Boxing Day, day after Christmas, in Sweden, they always play Ivanhoe. And
that's why we're revered. But I'm sure on behalf of you, I'm happy to send all my best wishes to our beloved friend. He's a magnificent actor. Never mind, I'll deal the other thing in the course of the question. Anyone got any questions?
No problem. And at the end, we'll talk about the upcoming copyright project as well.
All right.
We'll look at that. All right, I'll start over here. All right, we'll go to the Jedi over here. Hey, what's your name?
Nate. Hello, John. First, I just want to say thank you for everything you've done for the people like us. But my question for you,
Jedi?
Keep talking,
Us
keep
fans
talking.
in
I'm
general.
just trying to get my hearing ear near a sound source, that's all. Keep going.
So my question for you is, while filming Lord of the Rings, what would you have to say was like your favorite line that you said?
The favorite line I heard was cut. I don't know. I love that character. I mean, Gimli is so interesting because, in a way, he is the most human of all those characters. You know, he's got all the things in him that we recognize in ourselves. You know, prejudice, anger, hostility, aggression, suspicion, paranoia, and he's also got courage and the need to protect and the greatest thing of all, the ability to change, the ability to allow experience to let him see an enemy is really a friend. That the woman that he fears, there is a witch in the forest, and if any man sets his eye upon her, he is never the same again. Well, of course, that's exactly what happens to him. He meets Galadriel, and he falls deeply and irrevocably in love with her. What did she give you? Asks Legolas. I asked for one hair from her golden head. She gave me 3. And that's love. And of course you know exactly what's going to happen. He's going to take it back, these hairs back home, and he's going to make the most kitschy looking, over-bejeweled box with every damn jewel he can get. And people would be staring at it and saying, well, lovely box. Well, no, can you not see the hairs hanging there, you know? By the way, I've just been asked to do a new game. At least I think I've been asked. I don't know whether that there is a deal. But it's called A Return to Moria. And I've been asked, I think, to voice a certain dwarf in it. So it'll be very interesting. It would be nice to go back to without the makeup.
Great question. Thank you. Hey, pick. Is your Jedi green or blue or red? Blue. All right. All right. Who's got one back here?
You notice the way I didn't answer
Taking
that
it.
question.
All right. Young lady on the left right here. Hi. What's your name?
Ashley? I'd like to know who was your favorite actor to work with on Lord of the Rings.
No actor is going to fall for that one. You name one name, you alienate the entire, the rest of it. I will say this, that I've never worked with a group of actors so absolutely all-round magical in their own ways. Every one of them, different strengths, different qualities, but just magical. There was no weakness in the cast. And you know, if a director casts right, he's really in with a chance of getting his vision made. So part of the genius of Peter Jackson. Yeah. Will that not answer your question?
Thanks for trying. Hey, what's your name?
Steve,
Steve, what do you want to know?
you work with some legendary directors, Steven Spielberg, Peter Jackson. Do you have a particular style that you like to work with? Like direction that you like to take from directors?
I think a great director knows where his film's going. He knows the shape of it. He knows the trajectory of it. But I think the great ones, it really depends on the script. I mean, if you've got a perfect script, like Shogun, you couldn't take a word out of a sentence, let alone a sentence out of a scene, let alone a scene out of the story. Eric Bercovici, who did the screenplay, and we argued for 6 months over 5 words. I think I won 2 of the arguments. He certainly won 2. And I think he cheated and grabbed the 5th one himself anyway. But that's how precise it is. You had to learn every line. You couldn't really improvise in that situation. But equally, when you've got a good script that's still not fully come to life, then you want your actors to come with suggestions. And I like working with directors who you can say, how about doing this? And the younger ones were a bit scared of the schedule and things like that will often say, no, we've got to stick to the script. I'm going to stick to the script. But the ones who are free say, let's try it. It doesn't work that way, but if we did exactly the opposite of that, let's try that. Oh, and suddenly it goes. I like directors who know how to grow the individual contributions that every actor may make and choreograph them into telling a story. And the great directors, I think, are very free. They know what they want, but at the same time, if there's something else up for grabs, they're happy to take it.
Thank you very much. Great question, thank you. Got time for one
Was
more?
it young?
Yeah, we're gonna take this young hobbit over here, and hey, what's your name?
Johnny,
Hey, Johnny, what would you like to know?
so why did you choose to act in Lord of the Rings?
Why did I choose to act in the Lord of the Rings? Well,
Big question for such a little man.
do you know, I had not read Tolkien. I tried to read Tolkien to my youngest son, and he and I both fell asleep every time we read. My oldest son came home from a boarding school at half term. We didn't see him other than for meals. For 5 days he was reading Lord of the Rings. When I wanted to have a part in Lord of the Rings, I'd never been to New Zealand, and I thought I'd pick a nice small part, spend a month there, because no one's going to see this film, because it's impossible to film Lord of the Rings. You can't do it. And when I got off at Gimli, my first answer was, are you insane? I'm going to play a dwarf with all that dwarf makeup on? And my manager just straightforward lied to me. She said, oh, don't worry, they say they'll get it down to about an hour. I said, I have been in the business a little longer than you, love, and it isn't an hour. And I was at the point of actually turning it down when 2 things happened. One, the new agent that I had said, John, if you turn down this part, I don't think we can continue to represent you, which is a pretty tough kick, isn't it, really? And my number 1 son, my eldest son, who loved talking, said, Dad, turn this down, I think you're making a big mistake. He said, just think, in every bookshop in the reading world, there is at least that much of books on Tolkien, right throughout the world in every language. Think of what that means as a fan base. And I thought, that's pretty smart. But anyway, it doesn't make any difference. I don't want to go to New Zealand and spend 3 years, behind a prosthetic mask for a film that isn't going to be, that no one will go to see. The first one, you can't make that book into a film. And then I went to New Zealand, and I went to every department. And in New Zealand, what the hell has New Zealand ever done for the film industry? Yeah, Peter Jackson, yes, surely, has done 2 or 3 small little movies, and they're good. There's no doubt about it. He's a good director. But anyone, with 4 actors and 6 weeks to shoot it, can shoot a screenplay. Anybody. Even you, sir. And you do probably a wonderful job with it too. Anyway, I went there, and I went and looked at every department, and in every department I saw that Peter Jackson had made a film industry. Every department was world class, and it had an enthusiasm that you'd never find in any of the great filmmaking capitals of the world. Just a sheer enthusiasm to make this work. And then I thought, oh dear me, no, that means I really must stay. And then I thought, well, let me go and see how he directs people. And I watched him handle his crew and his cast. And I thought, this guy's got everything. And I turned around, in the space of 2 or 3 weeks, I turned around from being this is never going to work, to being the first guy at the first press conference who said, ladies and gentlemen, revise your expectations upwards. 3 predictions. 1, this first film is going to outgross the new Star Wars, at which point Peter Jackson went like this. 18 months later, he came to me and said, you know when you did that? He said, we just had outgrossed them. Secondly, when you look at these 3 films, you're going to discover that they're the most important films of the next decade, 20 years. And thirdly, when you look back on your list of great films you've seen, these are going to be amongst them in the top 10. And I still stick by that. These are set a new level of filming and entertainment. And they did Tolkien real justice. Anyway, look, I've gone on far too long, haven't I?
No worries. Just real quick before we wrap up, could you please share with the audience your new graphic novel project coming up? Your graphic comic book series.
What's that? Oh, the comic. Yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. About a year ago, 2 young men approached me and said, John, we would like to make a comic book of your life. To which I said, no, you aren't. I said, but you could make a comic book of the imaginative lives of some of the characters I played. So the first one begins, JRD is on a stage like this, and he's talking at a fan convention. And suddenly somebody rushes up from the back and, pushing people out of the way and puts something in his hand. And he says, find it, find them, or you will lose your life. At which, security is being sent for and all that sort of thing. And JRD, being the cool guy that we know he is, says, look, I'm terribly sorry about that, but I just want to make it clear. I'm John Rhys-Davies, the actor. I'm really not Gimli the dwarf. I am not a Professor Maximilian Arturo traveling between different universes. And you know what? I'm not the best digger in Cairo, actually finding the Holy Grail and the Ark of the Covenant. And he opens his hand and he looks and he says, now this gentleman, oh, that's very interesting. this gentleman has just given me a ring. And it's a Roman legionary ring. It's 9 Hispania. That's the lost legion, the famous lost legion of the Romans. And, well, I'm afraid I can't go out and find what happened to the lost legion. At which point he sits down, and his chair slips back, and he cracks his head, and he wakes up, and there he is, sitting on a branch next to two, I won't go into the details there, next to 2 senior Roman officers with a legion looking at them. And he is suddenly back. Now, has J.R.D., this character, sort of just had a sort of a brain flash? But he wakes up in his hotel later on, and he finds there's a character in there who says, "You will find what happens to the legion." And so it's absolutely perfect history as well. The history of the Ninth Legion portrayed in that is absolutely accurate. So when the comic comes out, I do hope you'll have a look. I'm not a comic person, but I wrote this story and I think it's rather fun. You are wonderful.
That's why you're here. It's your job, Rhys-Davies, and that was our time. He'll be back in the table just a little bit. Stop on by, find new stuff. Thank you as always, and thank you for your great questions.
Yes, you were best. Thank you so much. Bye.